Herb Jones has arguably been the most consistent and even potentially the MVP of the Pelicans, but could he win the NBA's Most Improved Player award? I'll tell you what I think of his chances in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Friday, final show of the week, and it's been a fun week, so I appreciate y'all making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. We got a show for you today. We're going to look at Herb Jones winning, more likely not winning, Most Improved Player. Kind of get into the history of that award a little bit to see if he has any sort of chance. There's a massive game against the Los Angeles Clippers tonight in the Smoothie King Center, the battle for the 4th spot. I'll let you know what Kawhi Leonard's injury status is and could be for this game. And then I want to get into why I'm actually not overly worried about the Pelicans' record against good teams above 500 this season. So we'll get into all of that in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Like I said, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Okay, let's get into Herb Jones here because he's good, right? Like we all agree, Herb has been absolutely fantastic this year. Absolutely fantastic. And the number and the reason for that is his three-pointers made and attempted. So far in just 60 games, he has attempted 209 three-point attempts. His previous career high in 78 games was his rookie year, so his first year in the league, and that was 169. So he's already taken 40 more three-point attempts, and the season's not even over. There's still 17 games left to go. He'll by far keep setting a record for himself here. He's also made 91 threes on the season. His previous career high was 57 his rookie year. It was 56 last year. So he's on pace to more than double that number and do it in about the same amount of games, right? This has been pretty incredible. All to say is he's shooting 43.5% from three. And since the start of the new year, 2024, it's even higher than that. With him being that offensive threat, with the defense that he is known for, right? Could he then win Most Improved Player? You can say he has made a dramatic jump. He's doing it on a winning team. And as I said in the open of the show, he's been maybe the most consistent guy out there and he's played in all of the games. There's the leadership aspect of it. You could argue, I don't know if you necessarily convinced me or other people that he's the MVP of this team. I don't know. That's a pretty good case for Most Improved Player, right? Probably not. Unfortunately, not the case. I don't think Herb Jones has a chance at winning Most Improved Player. I don't know if he'll even get votes for Most Improved Player. I'm here to be the bearer of the bad news. I went and looked at the odds. I was kind of curious. So I checked on FanDuel to see what the Herb Jones odds were for Most Improved Player. He's not on the list. It's Kobe White of the Chicago Bulls. He's had a bit of a breakout year. Is #1 on their list. Tyrese Maxey is #2. Then it's Jalen Williams with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then Jonathan Kuminga at 4th. That's their 4-man thing. I looked elsewhere and the odds for him, in the one place you could get him is plus 10,000. So essentially saying like, yeah, no, right? Like that's not real odds. Plus 10,000 doesn't give him even close to any of that. So that being said, the voters in Vegas clearly don't think that Herb Jones is the case. But again, he's been good. Why shouldn't he win it? When you look at the history of this award, and we can go back, so let's go back to the last 4 guys who have won it, 5 guys, 6 guys who have won it, I think are all kind of good to look at. And CJ McCollum, by the way, has won this too. Last year was Lauri Markkanen of the Utah Jazz. And when you look at his per game numbers, and that's what they're going to look at, He went from 14.8 points per game to 25.6 points per game. So it's about an increase of 11, right? Herb Jones, for as good as he has been this year, his per game numbers have gone from 9.8 points per game to 11.1. It's about 1.3 points per game more. Look, that's good. Don't get me wrong. It's an improvement. But for all of his three-point shooting, and he's up one attempt per game, it's not that kind of significant jump in scoring that you see. So Larry Markkinen went up almost 11 points per game. When John Morant won it the year before him, he went from 19.1 points per game to 27.4 points per game, right? That's a significant increase. Julius Randle won it in his second year on the New York Knicks, where he went from 19.5 points per game to 24.1, which is at the time a career high for him. But he also did it while shooting, significantly up in his 3-point percentage, while grabbing more rebounds than he ever has by dishing out more assists. So even if the points per game jump isn't there, it was the other things that did it. And then you look at Brandon Ingram here in New Orleans in the year that he won it, right? He increased about 5 points per game. That's the minimum. We went from 18.3 to 23.8. So about 5 points per game there with that. But his 3-point percentage increased dramatically. Well, Herb's done that. But so did his rebounds. So did his assists and all of those other numbers. Herb Jones, the main thing he's improved, because he was a good player already, is just the points per. It's just the points per game in the 3-point percentage. His rebounds per game are actually down this year compared to last year. His assists are exactly the same. The steals and blocks, if you combine that number, stocks, are exactly the same. It's truly the 3-point percentage that has increased, and that is massively, massively important for this team. But his defense, and I said it, and I specifically used this word, right, when we were talking about him and kind of his accolades and what he's known for, is like, he's already known for the defense. The defense, while amazing, has always been on the top end. I can't say he's like a significantly better defender this season than last year, and that's not a knock, because he's already an insane defender and has been. But that's not going to win you the most improved player award. It's going to go to a guy like Tyrese Maxey or Coby White, who have significantly increased their points per game, and that's kind of what they're looking for with this. Coby White has gone from 9.7 points per game to 19.5. Now, he's starting and not. That's often going to play a role in this sort of thing, right? Maxey, who is really broken out in the wake of James Harden not being there, has gone from, where are his numbers? 25.9 points per game from 20.3. It was still already up there, but more minutes and increased role. That's why I think you're going to end up seeing it go to Coby White, because Maxey had a pretty outsized role and was doing well, and this isn't like the most insane jump that we've ever seen, though Maxey is real good. His assist numbers are up. The rebound numbers are up. The defensive numbers are up, basically kind of everywhere across the board. That's what Herb Jones needed to be doing as well if he wanted to win this award. I don't have any problem with Herb Jones. I think he's a perfect player. I think that contract's going to be one of the best in the league. But no, he's not going to win most improved player. I don't even think you'll really see him on the ballot necessarily for a lot of people. Maybe he gets a couple of like token 3rd, 4th, 5th place votes, something along those lines. But I don't expect him to win the most improved player. The one we want to see him win is going to be get on the all defensive team, which he absolutely should. It will be a crime. A crime. We will prosecute you if he's not first team. Not second team. Don't give me any of that. First team. But he's not going to win most improved player. Coming up, Kawhi Leonard going to play Friday night, depending on when you're listening to this, against the New Orleans Pelicans. I almost forgot the team. The New Orleans Pelicans. Maybe, maybe not. We can maybe read into what's happening on Thursday night. Let's get into that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, it's my favorite, eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us in this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. This one is easy. It's Grady Dick, The Raptors seem committed to giving us 30 minutes of dick each night as they rotate in and out other players in their lineup. So grab Grady Dick off the waiver wire, plug him into your lineup if you can. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is all about each player being the perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. That's why I work on all of my cars. I order all of my parts for eBay Motors, whether it's the old Corvette and getting a new window for the passenger side, whether it's just little parts to get the steering wheel fitting right, which also recently happened. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. And at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your vehicle on the road over at ebaymotors.com. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join almost 10,000 other Pelicans fans on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview, coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern, be the first to get the local insight from the MLB experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Fire TV channels app. Massive game for the Pelicans tonight in the Smoothie King Center as they're taking on the Los Angeles Clippers, who they are fighting for to get the spot for fourth or potentially for, the Minnesota Timberwolves too. But right now it is the Los Angeles Clippers. And after that loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Pelicans, when I'm recording this and it's during the Clippers game and they're winning, they're 6.5 games, or not 6.5 games. They're 2.5 games back of the Clippers for the 4th seed. So under 3, if the Clippers win this, it jumps up to 3. So you have a chance to claw that number back and make it 2 or, 1.5, depending on how this is going to go. This is a good opportunity for the Pelicans to make up some standings or make up some ground in the standings. And, one of the things that happened Tuesday night, and I actually covered it on Locked On NBA, was Kawhi Leonard left the game in the first half against the Minnesota Timberwolves, a game that the Clippers, once he left, just looked lost. They looked terrible in that game once he wasn't in there. And after having a 15-point lead in the first quarter and leading the game in the third, the Minnesota Timberwolves came storming back, got that win, got the victory, and gave the Clippers a loss, which we liked. Kawhi Leonard left injured, and the thing that was kind of a big deal about that was when he left the game injured, not only did he just leave the game and go to the locker room, but he left the arena during the game. They announced that it was with thoracic spasms, so just back spasms, but a kind of specific type where instead of just like standing, like kind of sitting is not great for you. You either need to be completely standing or you need to be like vertical or horizontal. That's it. No like moving of the spine at an angle or anything like that. Vertical, horizontal. So sitting on the bench during a game doesn't make a lot of sense. I think they put him in a car, sent him home for him to rest. Now, he got on the team's plane to go to play the Chicago Bulls, which was a good sign for him and that team that he was going to play, because if his back was hurting that bad, getting on a plane flight wasn't going to be a good thing. And he started this game against the Chicago Bulls on Thursday night. And as I'm recording this, he's having himself a good game. He's 7 of 9. I think it's the first half in this game still here. It's about to end for 14 points. Paul George, by the way, also 6 of 6. He's 3 for 3. He has been somewhat struggling, not playing well recently for the Clippers. Those guys are playing right now and playing well. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you will get Kawhi Leonard in the Smoothie King Center. And look, for the Pelicans, you got to get a win here. Better if he doesn't play, right? Now, we've seen Herb Jones lock him down, but that then lets you be free to kind of go lock down Paul George, and that's probably easier than guarding Kawhi Leonard. So this is how this often works on back-to-backs, right? I've said this a lot here. The general kind of agreed-upon strategy in the NBA, not always the case, is you play your guys in the game that you're more likely to win. You don't take, you don't go in with a depleted squad for the game that you're favored in that you think you can win of the two. Go and make sure you get that victory. You go in with a bit of a depleted squad. Maybe you lose that game. You play a fully healthy squad against the harder game the next night. You still might lose that, and now you're 0 for 2 instead of 1-1. So playing against the Chicago Bulls, who have surprised some teams, they swept the Pelicans this year. Them putting all their guys out there trying to get that win. I wonder if that means they know the Pelicans game is harder. It is. And maybe they'll just take it a little bit easier. Now, this game against the Pelicans has more massive stakes, I'd say, than the game against the Los Angeles Clippers. But, you got to take the wins where you can get them. And that one seems like much more of a guaranteed win. So just because Kawhi Leonard is playing in this one does not mean that he's going to end up playing Friday against New Orleans. Because we know the load management, right? Like he's kind of the guy that created that brought it into vogue in the NBA, and we don't love it. So here's the thing about that, though, that you might not be aware of. They haven't been load managing him much this season. The Clippers have done a good job of just playing those guys, partially because what they've had happen the past couple of seasons is they load manage guys like crazy. Then you get into the postseason and they look like they're complete strangers with one another. And then they lose a series or blow a 3-1 lead or something like that because they can't figure certain things out. Or maybe that was just Doc Rivers. Could have been one or the other here. But Paul George and Kawhi Leonard have played in the majority of their games and played the majority of those games together. That's a really good sign for the Clippers, kind of worse for the Pelicans if you're hoping one or both. And Paul George won't sit this one out. One or both could end up sitting out here. It's 64 games they played going into tonight. 65 games now. We'll add a number here. Paul George has played in 59 of their 65 games. Kawhi Leonard has played in 59 of their 65 games. Because of that, I don't know if they're going to load management, give them a night off for rest or anything like that. So it's going to make this game a little bit tougher for the Pelicans. I just want to see the Pels win. I want to see them try and get the 4th seed, make their road in the playoffs a little bit easier here. But, and I'll tell you this, it's unfortunate, but here, hold on Paul George. Let's talk about Paul George here before we get to the record part. Paul George has kind of been struggling too. He had in that game against the Timberwolves, and I watched most of that because I was covering it on Locked On NBA the next day or later that night. Kawhi Leonard left and Paul George, playoff P, right? It just didn't take over the game. Like he has had some inability when it comes to that. And it's kind of strange, a game that they really needed to win because they're kind of chasing the Minnesota Timberwolves in the standings. It seems like a good opportunity to gain some ground there, on the team that you're chasing, right? That win's big. It essentially counts for double in a sense. And Kawhi Leonard leaves the game. And Paul George just doesn't take over. It was like oddly quiet. He had 22 points on 11 shots, like great efficiency, right? And it just didn't feel like he really impacted the game at all. And he's been turning the ball over a lot. This is one of those games that even if Kawhi Leonard plays, if Herb Jones shuts him down and kind of puts the burden on Paul George, is he capable of doing that? Yeah, they still have James Harden, right? Like that's a guy that can come in and play well, and he didn't play in this game, so he's likely going to maybe play in the next game here. But overall, it's still a team that could kind of crumble, especially with Russell Westbrook, who's been, I think, really good for them off the bench, even if he's not exactly like their sixth man here. So we're going to end up seeing what happens in this one, and I'm really excited because I think it should be a good game, and hopefully no Kawhi Leonard, and it makes it a little bit easier for the Pelicans but I don't care about this because their record against the top group of teams in the NBA against teams with a winning record 500 has not been good. But I'm going to tell you something about that. I don't care what their record is against winning teams. I'll explain why coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget, and they do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. I hate shopping. Like, I hate going into stores. When you're ordering things online, are they going to be the right size? Then you got to deal with returning it if it doesn't. It's just like a hassle, right? Stitch Fix, they're going to make it so much easier. You could just easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new, on-trend favorites that will work for you. You just give your stylist your size, style, budget preferences, order boxes when and how you want, and no subscription required. They're going to send 5 items picked just for you, outfit recommendations, and pro styling advice. Keep what works, send back the rest. So the fit is always going to be on point. It's like they have stylist ESP for what you're looking for, and you don't have to go to the store. You don't have to worry about, is this going to be the right size? They got someone for you, and then they're going to make it easy if you don't like a piece. So style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. stitchfix.com/lockedon to get started. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pels team. Tell a friend about the show. It's going to be a fun end of the year. Pelicans have a chance to, maybe rise up in the standings starting tonight in the Smoothie King Center against the Los Angeles Clippers. We'll see what they're capable of doing. Talked a little bit about that game. It's funny that we kind of did somewhat of a preview, but not really a preview for that game. After someone asked me why I don't do stuff like that. I don't love doing game previews, to be perfectly honest. I talked about it on Twitter, @NolaJake, about why if you're interested in some of the philosophy and how I structure the show, think about the show, that was a little kind of insight onto what I do, why I don't do specific game previews. Just don't think there's, if you an everydayer or aren't an everydayer and you listen like 2 days later, you don't need to listen to a game preview for a game that already happened. It's kind of pointless, right? It's dated content then. I don't want that. A lot of y'all tell me you listen like on Friday, on Saturday, and Sunday, and listen all throughout the week and kind of catch up on things. So talking about games that have happened and that we have definitive things to kind of learn from that is more evergreen. So that's kind of part of the reason why I went into it a little bit more on Twitter if you're curious. All right, we're wrapping up the show here. I have an interesting stat for you. I'm gonna because you'll just look it up. Y'all will cheat. I know you. I'll tell you what the stat is. It's cool. It has nothing to do with anything, and I just kind of found it, and I really just enjoyed that stat, which was kind of cool here. So the Pelicans don't have a great record against winning teams, against 500 teams here, but I'm not worried about that. I don't care. I'm not even going to list the records or anything because it doesn't particularly matter. To me, this team just needs to get into the postseason. That's like literally the only thing I truly care about is them getting into the postseason, because truthfully, it is a different animal than during the regular season. The game is officiated differently. I think that you have a lot more to learn with preparation and things like that, right? In a one-game thing, say against the Cleveland Cavaliers, you just shoot poorly, you lose the game, that's that. You're likely not going to shoot that poorly. I'm not saying like for sure, but you're likely not going to shoot that poorly over a 4 to 7 game series, right? That's where sample size, things even out, come into play. And that's how you'll truly be able to kind of evaluate the team. Not these one-off regular season games that have a lot of noise in them when it comes to things. Yes, trends emerge, and we're starting to see some of that. But overall, I want to see this team in a playoff series. So that's it. I don't really have expectations, especially not as a top 4 seed, that they're going to get out of the first round of the playoffs, right? I don't have expectations that they're going to win a series. If they do, that would be great. I don't have expectations that they can get to the conference finals, the NBA finals, right? I just want to see them in the postseason, and we can kind of go from there. You look terrible, you get swept, okay, that's fine. We then know what caused that, and you make adjustments this offseason accordingly, and you can just do that. And it's much easier, right? And you have definitive knowledge. How does Zion play in the postseason? Bad? Well, then maybe look at trading him. Do he and BI not fit? Then maybe look at trading one of them, right? Kind of all of that. How's the center position look? I'm worried about that, right? Does CJ arrive and do it in this job here? So all of that, I think, is good data to get and helps you kind of evaluate a team that you've never been able to fully evaluate because they've been injured, or you just haven't been in the postseason in general. You lose in the play-in tournament, right? So now we'll finally be able to answer some of these questions. So just get in. Just get into the playoffs. 4th seed, great. 6th seed, all right, we'll take it. Just avoid the play-in tournament. Don't care. So their record, because I don't have these expectations at all in the postseason that they'll do, if they draw the right matchup, they could win. I certainly think that you get the Timberwolves in the first round. There's like a very realistic chance of that. Clippers is tougher, but I think it's doable. We'll maybe have a better idea for that, tonight. But I just want them to get in. And since I don't think they're necessarily I don't expect them, is what I should say, to get out of the first round of the playoffs, who cares what the record is against 500 teams? If it's bad, that's fine. That kind of then proves you need to do something here. And we'll definitely know more in the postseason. And so that, I think, is kind of what my goals are for this team, my personal goals. They might have different goals, but I think it's pretty similar to that. So now that we know that, who cares what the record is against good teams? Maybe they're terrible against good teams. It's a bit disappointing, but then it just means you got to change things so you're not next year, right? That's what it tells us. That's why I just don't find it helpful to necessarily look at that or use that as a benchmark for things, right? The Cavaliers are a good team. You just lost to them because your shooting was poor. It was truly kind of as simple as that, right? They made 20 threes. The Pelicans made four. Is that what it was, right? That's a 16 difference there, and that's 48 points. Pelicans go closer to 40% on their 22 attempts, right? That's 8.8. So if we added 8.8 times 3, let's call it, 26 points minus the 4 they made, minus 12. I'm doing math here on my calculator. That's another 14 and a half points that in theory could have been added, right? That's if they get kind of closer to their normal number, because they are a good 3-point shooting team. And trust me, there's a show coming of, is it okay if this team lives and dies by the 3? And we're going to answer that question. I'm going to give you my opinion on that. You may disagree, and I'm excited for that show. So keep an eye out for that, maybe next week or so. But because it's just such an anomaly, is there actually something to take away from that? That game, yes, because of some things, but I don't think we should read that as in this team can't compete. You got to see it over a series, and that's what we'll get in the postseason, and I think that's the biggest thing for me. So I don't really care what their record is or isn't against above 500 teams, just because of kind of the lack of expectations that they should be beating those teams. All that does is just tell us, it might be disappointing they lose, but then it just tells us they need to make more changes. Good. We know that for sure, and they better do it this offseason. Otherwise, we're then going to repeat all of this, and then we should be even more upset. So that's why I don't really care what their record against overall good teams above 500, playoff teams, whatever you want to call them, is this season. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that assessment in the comments down below. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLAJake on Twitter. Back with you on Monday to recap the weekend games against the Clippers, games against the Portland Trailblazers, St. Patrick's Day parade. It's going to be fun. Weather should be kind of nice. It's great. We'll talk about everything on Monday as part of the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. See y'all then.